The Phantom of the X era is here, and he is Fantomex. Let's talk about Marvel Snap's newest card and see how good it is. Fantomex is a 4/6 with an activate that checks to see if you have discarded a card and had one of your cards destroyed. If you have, he effectively gives you 12 power, afflicting your opponent's entire front row across all 3 locations with -6 power. Now, good news, that's a really powerful effect. Bad news, he's a 4-cost activate with further things slapped onto him. Worse news, there's really only one card that a normal deck would be willing to play to get the discard part of this off, and it's very difficult to talk about Fantomex outside of the context of this specific card. The card is Gambit, and he's gonna come up a lot because when you're playing a Fantomex deck, the way activates work, what you can do is discard something with Gambit, get the boom, and then schedule Fantomex to activate on the back end. So Gambit is pretty much the day one BFF of Fantomex, which is much to the chagrin of everyone who hates RNG in their Marvel Snap, although I question whether or not that's a real thing you can do. This is a card that is going to be in a lot of these decks. He's currently BFF number 1 for Fantomex, but he's not the only thing you can do. The reason he shows up so much is that every other discard is asking a little bit too much of you for you to be able to free roll it, whereas Gambit is just saying, play me on the final turn of the game. This comes up pretty consistently in the way you're going to be deck building with Fantomex. You tend to be leaning one direction or the other, and then using Gambit to complement your mostly destroy package, for example. This is the list that I've been the most impressed with this new card, and it is meant to double up on making sure that it actually happens. Jocasta Prodigy to multiply Fantomex does do his effect a whole lot, and that is a lot of power to be slapped onto one effect. Unfortunately, rather than being a Fantomex deck per se, this deck has the same strengths and weaknesses as a normal Jocasta Prodigy deck, i.e., don't get Cosmic Ghost Ridered, don't get Deafening Corded, really hope they can't see what you're actually going to be doing with this stuff, but the curve does work. You do things like turn 3 Jocasta, turn 4 Fantomex, turn 5 play your 3 Energy Prodigy on the Jocasta, put a Wild Child somewhere else, final turn of the game, do something with a Gambit. You've heard that one before. Blow something up with a Kid Omega, blow something up with a Carnage, all of that stuff. This deck is using the rest of itself to enable Fantomex, which is largely the place where it falls short compared to other Jocasta decks, which is not to say this deck is bad, just when you're thinking about, I'm going to make a Jocasta deck, you look at this deck and you look at basically the other 6 cards in it. They are there to enable Fantomex and make Fantomex work. Then you look at, say, a Surfer deck, and your other 6 cards that are not part of your combo are actually going to be doing really good and powerful things. They do a lot of work here, and I think that that is largely the thing you're giving up when you go to become one of these decks. Another option you have is replacing something like a Marrow with an awesome Andy. I believe that was the original way in which this was built. One of the cool things this deck gets to do is chuck a Airwalker into the lane that has the activates on it, and that gets you multiplicative things as well. One of the other cool backup lines you have is Kid Omega Jocasta with Wolverine. Very funny thing to do if you are able to make that happen. Extremely stupid, not particularly good, but it does exist. All of this adds up into a fairly potent list, and probably the best of the Fantomex list that I've seen so far, which is a bit of an awkward thing to say because I think it's probably one of the worst Jocasta lists that you could play. That's sort of going to set the tone for where this guy's at. Dormammu Morgan Le Fay is a fairly competent place for this card to go, although you are a little bit limited in terms of the discards you can play. The existence of Morgan Le Fay means that your discards are not nearly so bad. Morgan Le Fay could very well be the key to unlocking Fantomex, in the sense that this is a card that is asking a lot of you in terms of deck building, and sometimes that's going to mean that you're going to have these awkward hands where you kind of have to play a card that discards a card, but playing a card that discards a card is so incredibly terrible. Morgan Le Fay getting back both discarded and destroyed cards means that that's not nearly as bad as it otherwise would be, and these two cards sort of complement each other. The setup for Fantomex is the setup for Morgan Le Fay. That kind of thing allows you to recoup a lot of your potential losses from Fantomex. Dormammu, of course, also just gives you things to do. That's an important key to what this deck is doing. It comes from Derek. It's a relatively powerful list. I think it's doing strong enough stuff that it is a thing that is worth looking at. You are also seeing another Airwalker here. A lot of Fantomex decks, I mean, if you're going to take this much deck building effort, you better be getting the guy. Similar principle to the Husky Puppies Blink Aurora decks. I think this is a solid deck that outputs a lot of points. It has very little in the way of interaction, but it does have some marrow afflicting stuff, can be pretty good against Nimrod decks, things of that nature. You can disrupt Jocasta lists with your Uncle Ben turning into Spider-Man and moving cards. You have afflicts going on here. There are things that can keep opponents down, but you don't have any hard tech. There's not a lot of Shadow King here, but on the upside, you do have a lot of power in terms of the final few turns of the game. A lot of power hidden in hand in a deck like this. I do kind of want to try to get a Gambit in here because I just love the way he works with Fantomex so much, but I think largely this kind of shell, the combination of a Morgan deck with Fantomex, is a very powerful way to play this card. Might be the best unique to Fantomex way to play it, in the sense that I think a lot of other Fantomex decks are taking a shell that is already pretty reasonable and putting Fantomex in it and maybe making it worse. This, I think, is a place where you can argue Fantomex is genuinely improving the list. Here's the one I've been messing around with, and I'm really not sure on the exact formation of this, but I do feel like I'm getting somewhere reasonable. Like, this is not an unplayable deck. It feels pretty close to an actual deck. But I keep moving cards in and out. Couple of things that are worth pointing out here. Luna Snow, destroying the Ice Cube does count as a destroy for Fantomex, but we don't have any really good ways to get discards other than Gambit. So it's very much like if your hand lines up, then you play the Fantomex and he's really, really big. If your hand doesn't line up, it's kind of whatever. Our destroys are Luna Snow and Misery, and those are just really good cards anyway. A couple of cards that I'm really not sure about. I'm not sure about Fenris Wolf. I'm not sure about Gladiator. I've tried Shang-Chi in here. I want to see if I can get Death in here. There's just kind of a lot of stuff where it's like, I wish I had a better option for a secondary Gambit-like piece, because I just don't. And because it doesn't exist. I do worry that when you put this deck together and you stack it up and you look at it and then you look at V-Hand, V-Hand might just end up doing what this deck is doing better than it. But I also think I'm a couple cards off. Like, it's possible we're not supposed to be a Fenris deck. It's possible we're not supposed to be a Gladiator deck. It's possible what we're supposed to be is, like, invest more in being a good Death deck. I do think Shang-Chi is probably wrong, even with the Fenris in here. Like, the only matchup that's really good against is Ramp. If you see a lot of Ramp, you can do Fenris Shang, but other than that, I'm not feeling it really good. The other problem is, if you see a lot of Ramp, you really don't want to be a Gladiator deck. And so, like, there's this whole thing where I think Fenris and Gladiator are probably wrong, but I don't have a better idea for what they should be. And if I want to put Death in here, I probably don't want to cut Gladiator because that's a Death trigger. It's just a lot going on here. Basically, I think there is something here, and I think if you spend the time and get enough of, like, what should be in this list hammered out, you'll have a pretty good list. I can even make an argument that it might be better than V-Hand in the sense that it gets to win the heads up because it runs Killmonger, and that's a real advantage that you have. But I almost feel like this list is one actual good discard proc away, and I don't mean like, oh, you know, KMBest forgot to put Blade in here. I mean like an actual good one. Like one that will actually benefit you and do something bad for your opponents. And right now, it's kind of just Gambit, and that is the most awkward thing about a deck like this, is that, you know, Wild Child's very fine if you only get one. I've been incredibly impressed with Wild Child here. That's just a 2-5 almost every game. It's gonna happen. That's awesome. I'm really into that. Fantomex doesn't work unless you get both, and I almost wish they could have done him gradations-wise, where it's like, if you get one, it's -1 to all the things. If you get two, it's -2 to all the things. I honestly think that if they feel the need to buff Fantomex, that would be the kind of thing they should do if it is at all possible, because right now his biggest issue in a deck like this is just he's not on a lot of the time. You can see a lot of the same dynamics being put into practice here, but there's just a lot less good cards in here and a lot more highly specific things. I do want to highlight the Black Cat thing. I almost wonder if that should be the kind of thing people are doing, but I just don't think it's worth going down a card to make that happen. It doesn't seem like the right thing to do to me. I think it's cool. I think it's cute, but almost every time I would far rather be playing the Gambit line than the Black Cat line. And the Black Cat line pushes against the Gambit line, because if you discard something with Black Cat, you're less likely to have something in your hand to actually get the Gambit, to actually work on the final turn of the game. I do like the Moira X here thing, though. I think it is a nice little way of, again, like the biggest problem this deck, this card has, is it sort of puts itself in situations where it goes down on cards in order to make Fantomex work. Having a way to mitigate that, I think, is pretty important. I think it's a very solid thing to do. I like it a lot. I mean, Marrow is a card that I found pretty impressive here. Just the numbers that it's able to output on the board, pretty solid. But I think largely, like, this is a deck that I like the curve a lot more. I don't like the lack of interaction, especially the lack of Shadow King. I don't like not being a Misery Hood deck. There's just things to figure out about this guy, where I think that this kind of stuff right now is like mid 40s win rate. If you really like put the work in, I think you can get it up to like being an actual functional deck. I think that something in this space could be a very real thing to do, is largely what I'm trying to convey here. I just think that it might be more likely to be more in the Morgan Dormammu space that we already talked about. So, what do we think about Fantom-X? Largely, my review is that I don't think he's winning you games just yet. And some of that is that I think a lot of early deck builds of this card are honestly quite bad. Like, it is just a lot of over investments in this guy, a lot of let's make my entire deck bad to make him work. The problem is he might not actually work if you don't do that, and that is largely the biggest issue. This is a card that is asking a lot of you and probably isn't paying you off enough. My instinct is that it would be very cool if they change the activate to function similar to Wild Child. I think if you are able to do that, that is a card that is distinctly not busted in either of Destroy or a normal discard deck. It's going to be not a card that is busted there. You're still going to want to build this way, but it's going to make it feel a lot better when your entire deck doesn't come together. I think that that's a pretty low risk change if they have the functionality to actually make that happen. And until they make that change, I worry that this guy is kind of medium, where I was very surprised by how good Aurora was versus how good I thought she was going to be. I'm almost surprised the other way here. I thought this would be like a pretty reasonable card in a bunch of 48% win rate decks. Instead, he doesn't seem to, like, people seem to be making like 35% win rate decks for this guy. Like, just decks that are just like piles of stuff that say destroy and discard on them. I don't buy it. I think you're going to have to get somewhere closer to Derek's list, somewhere closer to my list, before you actually start playing like reasonable games with him. But once you do, he does strong stuff. Like, I don't want to act like he's not good. He does stuff. It's just he's hard to make work. He requires a lot of thought, and he requires some pretty good deck building, and I just don't think there's been enough of that. And I'm hoping this video with the Smiz deck, the Derek deck, and my deck can start percolating down some builds that I think really make a lot more sense than a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing with this guy. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. I received a lot of good responses about the idea of the snappies, so I'm actually working on putting that together. Hopefully we'll be able to do the nominees tomorrow. Happy New Year, of course. It is, of course, the last day of the year right now. Have a wonderful New Year's Eve, and I will see you in the next year.